How do you actually create it? And how do you grow it over time? So when we think about social, we oftentimes think about social media channels, places that you will often frequent. So let's put a couple of them out there so we can see what they look like. Well, first of all, there's Facebook. How many of you are on Facebook? Let's just see a show of hands. Raise them up really high. There's a lot of you. Okay, great. But it's more than just Facebook. It's many other sites. It's LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. There's a lot of them out there. And I can't even begin to put all of them on here because, frankly, this is out of date as soon as I update it. Now, when we think about social business, though, as Steve was saying, it's more than just these channels. In fact, I don't think of this as social business at all. These are social media channels. It's where people go, and places people go to actually find each other, connect with each other. But you also know that people come together at meetings like this, and one-on-one meetings in your businesses with your customers, even within your work teams inside of your businesses. And that's not reflected in many of these channels. Social business is much bigger. And what I'm going to do today is talk about three things. First of all, I'm going to talk about what this future looks like of a social business. Because in order to build it, if you look around today, you won't find very many examples. So I'll paint a picture for you of what a social business actually looks like. Then we'll go through and say, how do you actually create a social business strategy? A strategy that says, this is what we will do, and just as importantly, what we won't do with our social business. And I'll take you through the stages of development, of maturity for a social business. And then lastly, I'll take you through how do you actually get started? How do you prepare throughout the entire stages of all you have to go through all those journeys and the steps that you have to take? What do you have to do in order to be successful in a social business? So let me give you a glimpse of what this future looks like. When it comes to being a social business, well, let's start with our customers. And I thought I'd start with myself. So what do you really know about customers? Well, what do companies really know about me? If you look inside your CRM databases, you look inside the demographics and information, this is what you usually find about me. You know that I'm between the ages of 25 and 55, and I give you a really big range here. So you don't have to exactly know, but you know I'm in that range. You know that I have kids, you know probably that I work, that I read certain magazines that have a graduate degree, that I travel a lot. And I read magazines that are focused on women and also on technology. So what do you know about me? You actually don't know very much. Well, you could look at my Facebook page and you could find out a few more things about me. You would find out that I'm actually here in Dubai, that I'm speaking at Oracle World, that I recently made cupcakes with my kids. What else can you know about me? Well, what else do I actually share through my social media channels? Well, I have a Nike Fuel Band that I wear on my wrist, and I share the information on there about how often I go running, because I'm training for a 5K. So how often I run, I share it with my running group. They know who I am, and they're encouraging me to keep on my schedule. And I also use this little device on my phone, this little app called Waze. It's a GPS. It uses my phone and sends signals to say, am I sitting in traffic, and how do I get to a certain place? And if there's a lot of traffic, then it'll tell me a different routing to take. It's crowdsourcing traffic because of all the other people using the same application. And I share that information, and in fact, I see people on my route regularly in my commute. It's like a little commuting community that we have together using that application. So what do you know about me? As Mark was saying, the proliferation of data is going to continue to increase. And for you to know what information about me is relevant and not so relevant is going to be an extremely important thing to understand. Just to give you an idea of how complex this world is going to be, let's take a look at all the different factors. We have traditional media, we have press, we have analysts, we have crowdsourcing, all the reviews of other people, and of course you have the people you trust, your friends, your colleagues, your family, as sources of information. Those are 5 different factors that you now have to track. People who could influence your customers. Well, what else do you have influencing you? You have different types of channels that you now have to manage as a marketing manager. You have traditional paid advertising. You have your traditional owned sites, like your websites, and now Facebook and Twitter. And you also have all the earned media, all the social media influence that's out there and available to you. 3 additional factors. But it gets even more complex. As Steve was saying, we also have all these different form factors. We have TV, we have traditional media, online, we have mobile, we have tablets, and we have this new funky stuff from Google Glass, that I can put on, and I'll be able to see reflected in me the context of everything in front of me. This augmented reality is what we're calling it. So technology continues to evolve, and you have to keep track of all of those things. So now we have 5 times 3 times 7, 75 different situations now we have to keep track of. But it gets even worse, because your customers go through a decision-making cycle. So that's 7 different ways, places where they could be managing and interacting with you. And you have to keep track of that too as well. Are they just in the beginning part of that buying cycle, or at the end? Are they a current customer? Are they renewing? What do you know about them in the context of your business? So let's take a look at this complexity. It's incredibly complex. One customer, 525 different permutations. Social data, sensors, all this information available to you at your fingertips, and you have no way of being able to understand context for it. Well, let's think about what this actually looks like inside of your business. Now, inside of your business, it comes down to this, and this is what I believe social is really good at. It's really about developing a relationship. It's not about all these new technologies that are out there. It's really, what kind of relationship do you want with your customers, with your partners, with your employees? So this is the way most organizations think about their relationships. It's very short term. It's very transactional, in fact. It's very occasional. It's happenstance. And it's fairly impersonal. You don't really know who I am. I am a customer number, frankly, to most businesses. But I think the kind of relationship most people want isn't on this side of the slide. It's over here. It's much more long-term. It's actually very different. It feels different. It looks different. It's two-way. It's constant. It's not a 6-week campaign. It's over years. And it's very authentic. It's very real. I would even say it's intimate and passionate. People really care about the companies they have a deep relationship with, and they really feel like the companies know them and care about them. I think what we want in our businesses, in our relationships, and it's possible through these social channels, is what's on this side of the slide. A long-term relationship that has deep meaning behind it. And I believe that being a social business really is about extending and understanding where these relationships are possible. So it's really much more than just marketing also. As Steve was saying, this is going across all areas of business. We talk about it impacting sales and the sales cycles, but also recruitment. Most of you probably found your job through somebody you know. More than 50% of people find their jobs through referrals. So it makes sense that social can be used for that. But it's also inside of performance reviews. How many of you really look forward to your annual performance review? Well, what happens typically in performance reviews? You sit down with your manager and you think about, well, what did you accomplish this year? And you can remember in great detail what happened over the past 2 months, but something that happened 10 or 11 months ago, kind of hard to remember. Well, if you use some of these social tools, especially the internal social networks, these enterprise social networks, you may be tracking everything that you do, all the interactions that you have, the projects that you work on. And also, when people are saying thank you to you, we say, good job. You can track all of these things. And now what becomes an everyday occurrence, you pull out. You do a hashtag of your goals, a hashtag of your accomplishments. You print them out and you walk into your performance review. Performance management automatically changes overnight because of that context and information that is now possible that you can glean from the social fabric of your organization. What about innovation? It's a catchword now as we're beginning into another whole growth phase of what do you actually find? Where do you find new ideas? You can get it from your customers, from your partners, from your employees. What are the possibilities of being able to have that real-time conversation? And then one of my favorite areas is supply chain. Supply chain, what's social around that? Well, what if you could detect when demand is changing? It can actually become predictive and understanding when inventory changes need to take place. And you can detect that ahead of your competition and actually shrink your supply chain by a couple of days. Those are advantages that drop straight down to the bottom line. So when seeing social business and social being driven into the organization, away from just these social channels, Facebook and Twitter, it's much more than that. It's about how do you harness the power of these social relationships to provide context. And I believe in many ways this is what the key thing is, and that in the future social will be like air. It'll be anywhere and everywhere that you need it to be. It'll just be right there, ready for you to take into and pull into these enterprise applications, into the workflow, into the very mindset and culture of your organization to be able to change and transform it. Let me give you an example of how that could be. If you think about the way social is today, it's actually a way to change how organizations work. This is how organizations typically are structured. Very rigid. There's a certain hierarchy, and information flows from the front lines up to the upper levels of management, and decisions flow back down. Not very flexible, not very fast or responsive to the very competitive and very fast-moving changes that are happening outside the landscape. Instead, what we want is something that looks very different. We want organizations that are adaptive. And what social does, it provides a context for that one piece of data. Is this data important? Should I care about it? If it's just one person, one analyst looking at it, you could never get context. But what if you could have an entire community of people who could tell you whether that piece of information was relevant, was important? And so I believe that social provides not only the connective tissue to tie all these disparate siloed organizations and enterprises together, but it also allows you to provide context, very important context, to understand what's important. So one other quick thing before we move on to strategy, I want to put up some data here about the international aspects of social, because I'm always asked, you know, well, I'm outside the US, we must be really far behind, and actually it's quite the opposite. This data actually shows social engagement. Along the vertical axis, you see the percentage of the population that's engaged in social media. On the horizontal axis is on an index scale of 0 to 100, how socially engaged that population is. And the size of the circle is actually how many people. You will see one big, huge pink circle up here of China. Highly, highly engaged. In fact, Chinese are very active in social media, not just in reading it, but actively participating in it. The United States is actually pretty low on the curve here. We're at about 35% or so. And the key thing here is that the US is kind of spoiled. We may have a lot of technologies and tools and the new apps, but as a population, Americans tend to be kind of lazy. We tend to be very passive. So when you're looking at a global business and you're thinking about where do we go and expand, and where do we actually develop some of these new business tools, think outside of the United States, because in many cases, the population of people who are going to be active in helping you create that social business, creating these new mindsets and processes, will be the ones who are already naturally socially engaged in their private lives and bring that into the organization. So I'm going to go on and talk about strategy now. How do you actually create a strategy around this? Well, in our research, we looked at why social strategies succeed and fail. And the number one reason why they fail is because of this. There's no business reason for it. They don't have clear business goals. Or ask people, why do you have your Facebook page? What are you trying to accomplish there? And people would say, well, we thought we needed a Facebook page. We just have one out there. We don't really know why we have one or what the business impact, and that's a horrible place to be. Because when somebody asks, well, what are we getting for social media? You kind of hem and haw, a little bit shuffling of the feet, and no clear answers. I believe instead that you have to have a very clear idea right from the very beginning, even before you get started, about why you are there engaging in the social media and social business space. Because frankly, strategy requires planning. You have to know where you will begin and also where you will end, what you will do and what you won't do in a roadmap to get to that goal. If you don't have a goal in mind, how can you get there? So what I'm going to lay out today are some stages that organizations can go through, and some typical goals that we see at different stages of those maturity stages. So here on the left-hand side are, first of all, the 6 stages. There's planning. You have to plan first. Then you have a presence. You start engaging with people. Then you formalize and actually organize in a formal way the way you approach social business. You then become very strategic, and in the end, you think about transformation, really transforming the business. And I urge you to think about these stages as we go through, and where you are in your journey, and what are the next stages that you have to go through. Now, within each of these stages, I'll go through very quickly what are some of the key elements. I do believe there has to be coherence in your strategy, even at the very beginning, to have clear business goal, clear metrics. Have an idea of the initiatives you will do, and what is the organizational and resources that you need in order to succeed. So let's take a look at planning first. Planning, I think of it as listening to learn. All those insights that you can glean from social without actually being out there. The conversations are happening. The question is, will you listen to them? So here's an example of what are some typical goals. People are trying to understand where their customers are. Where are the social channels that they're using? Which ones do they care about? Which ones don't matter? And it's really understanding what the voice of the customer is doing. And then it's also a time to prioritize what strategic goals you think are going to be impacted the most, right here at the very beginning, before you've gone anywhere. And some of the initiatives might be just putting up there some listening and monitoring, and doing some pilots, and also doing some competitive audits. There's one example of a company that has been doing this for quite a while, and when they started, which is the American Red Cross, they started actually just monitoring. All they did was listen to what people were saying, and in particular, because the Red Cross is focused on disaster relief, they need to know where the problems were. So they were listening to social media, and they still do this today, to understand if something's happening in this location, they radio it out to the command center and say, please deploy over into this area. So they do a lot of preparation before a hurricane comes in or a snowstorm to let people know where are the places where you can go to get help, where are the shelters where you can go to. But I think it's more than just listening and monitoring. At this stage, you also need to be doing some audits, both internally to see how ready you are, and also what competitors are doing. This is a screenshot from an audit that we typically do, about 55 different criteria that we look at from, do you have a process for risk management and crisis management in place? Are your stakeholders aligned? Do you have a social media policy that people actually know about and can read and find and actually use? These are all things that you have to have in place in order to be successful. How ready are you to be able to engage? And if you're not, then make a checklist of all the things so you can make sure you have them in place. And then finally, thinking about the pilots. I think about it as fishing where the fish are. You need to do some piloting first to understand where are these opportunities. Just by listening and monitoring and doing some audits by competitors won't necessarily guarantee you that the people are there that you're trying to reach. You need to do some of those pilots initially to gain confidence before diving in. But once you're ready with that planning, it's time to move in, to actually dive in and have a presence. And this is the stage where I call staking your claim. It's putting your foot out there in social media saying, this is where we will be, and this is where you can meet us. So in this stage, it's very different. This is really about tapping into your existing marketing efforts, making sure you can leverage them, and then amplifying it and encouraging people to share. Social is about sharing. That's how you build relationships. So this is the beginning part of building those relationships. So some of the things you might be doing is thinking about the content plan and putting in place a content management program. Here's an example from Shell. Now Shell is a big oil company, and what they do with their Facebook page, and they have almost 3 million people following it, is they're constantly putting up updates about how it is that they discover energy, how they think about production and discovery and also delivery to their customers. And they don't respond back. This page is only about a year old, 3 million followers already, beautiful, gorgeous pictures, and they have a very clear goal of what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to understand how they can use social media to influence their reputation as a company. And they do this and measure it every single day. They survey the people who are on Facebook and say, what do you think about the company? And they have metrics against that, and they compare that to the other channels where they're interacting with people. And they see what kind of impact their activities on Facebook have every single day against every other media that they have. Now, how many of you are on Facebook and actually measure to that level of degree a concrete business goal? And I would encourage you to think about this. This is not about driving ROI or sales, but it's still a very valid goal, managing your reputation. And doing it in a highly disciplined way to make sure that whatever you do on Facebook counts, that it matters to the bottom line, because reputation in the end drives that brand and drives the relationship you have with customers. So even here at the early stages of a business strategy, being very focused on that business impact, on those goals, is absolutely key and crucial to your survival. Now, at this point, it's more than just having a presence. So at some point, the scariest moment for many companies is to look over that edge and say, I'm going to begin having a dialogue with people. And this is where a lot of companies get stuck. Many of them will say, you know, I'm just comfortable having a presence. I feel comfortable talking to my customers in these channels. It feels like an extension of my existing marketing efforts. That's as far as I can go for now. And that's fine, as long as you understand what your business goals are. But if you choose to move forward, it takes a lot of courage at this stage, because it's a very different way. Having that dialogue, hearing from those 1,000 customers that Mark was talking about who are unhappy in a very public way takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of courage. This is not easy. And so this next phase of the maturity stage is about engagement. It's about using dialogue to deepen the relationships with your customers. And one of the ways that you can do this, again, is really about thinking about how a dialogue helps them, drives them to a purchase. Or how does dialogue help them be more satisfied customers, addresses a problem that they may be having? Or how does it actually help with your internal employees? How does dialogue encourage, again, greater employee engagement and satisfaction? So here's an example. This is Vodafone in UK, Spain, and Italy, just a couple of the countries that we were able to get some screenshots on Twitter. What they do is actively listen to where people are talking about Vodafone. So these aren't people writing to Twitter. They're just saying, hey, my Vodafone phone service is down. I'm not quite sure what's happening. I'm unhappy. They reach out to them. They're very proactive in saying, how can we help? How can we help you? You seem to be having a problem. We as a company have caused you pain. How can we help alleviate that? How can we make it better for you? How many of you have ever complained and gotten a response from a company? Or even worse, how often have you complained and heard nothing back? How many of your customers are talking about you right now and you have absolutely no idea? So in terms of engagement, this is a wonderful place to begin because conversations are happening already. The question is, will you actually respond back to these people? And to what extent will you actually encourage a conversation to take place? Here's another example of what happens, though, when you see this kind of enthusiasm happening. First of all, some people may be providing customer support in one product, another area, another geography is working, and suddenly all these different people are converging together onto the same customer in different channels with different messages. It's fantastic when it's growing, but at some point you need greater coordination.